Well, good afternoon and welcome to Ithemes Training. My name is Nathan Ingram and I am your host here. We are joined by Michael Moore, who's going to talk to us today about 10 tips to get the most out of BackupBuddy. We're glad that you've joined us, and we're looking forward to a great webinar of training, talking all about BackupBuddy and answering your questions along the way as well. As we get started today, I do want to direct your attention to the banner that's just to the right of the chat room at ithemes.com/chat. Reminding you that the birthday sale for Ithemes, it is our birthday this time of year, every year, and everything site-wide is 40% off through January the 18th. So take advantage of that. It's one of the best sales of the year. It doesn't get much higher than 40%, except maybe around Black Friday, but it's a great deal if you want to pick up some Ithemes products or Ithemes Hosting or the new Ithemes Training membership. All of those things are 40% off site-wide through January the 18th. So I'm joined today by Michael Moore, and Michael is the Associate Product Manager for Ithemes Products. He's been a member of the Ithemes team more than 4 years now, and some of you may have interacted with Michael when he was doing technical support for Ithemes Security, because he answered about 10,000 or more support tickets on security-related issues, so he's fielded a few security questions in his time. Or you might have heard Michael on previous Ithemes training webinars. Either way, he's a great guy and full of information. Today he's going to talk to us about BackupBuddy. So Michael, welcome. Good to have you back.
Hey, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited about today because BackupBuddy is a super powerful tool. It's feature packed. And what I want to do today is break down some of the mysticism of BackupBuddy and show you how to harness its power to make the backup schedule that works for your site. And then, are we okay to get started, Nathan?
Yeah, so I was just going to ask you what we're going to talk about, so that kind of gives us a little bit of an overview. And so for those of you who are just joining us, I see our attendee number ticking up quite a bit here in the last 30 seconds or so. Let me just remind you, the chat room is over at ithemes.com/chat, ithemes.com/chat. That's the place to ask your questions as we go. We are live, and you can interact with myself and Michael there and ask your questions as we go. It is helpful to me if you ask a question to preface your question with the word question in all uppercase. That way I'm sure to see it, and I'll be saving those questions for Michael as he wraps up, and we'll do a good time of Q&A about anything he's talked about or any other questions you might have about BackupBuddy. One thing I will ask, as always, is if you ask a question, please just watch the chat room for a couple of minutes following asking that question, just in case I might have a follow-up question for you, so we can get a good, clear, answerable question for Michael when we get to that time of Q&A. I'm going to drop the slide link in one more time there. So if you've come in a little bit late, you can download the slides and follow along. I'm also going to drop in the replay link. We are recording this, and if you want to go back and watch the replay, it'll be up about an hour after we conclude today. So I think that's just about it. I got a couple of questions already filtering in, so we should have a good discussion afterwards. But for now, Michael, let's talk about these 10 tips.
Awesome. Sorry, I got a little excited. I am excited about today's webinar. I've put a lot of thought into this one. Not that I haven't in the past, but I'm really excited about this because I think we have a lot of useful information. So really how we're going to kind of structure this webinar is we're going to talk about what is a good backup strategy. What do you need to include in your backup strategy to make sure that you're safe or your site is safe from any kind of data loss. And then once we have our backup strategy, as we work through that, we're going to show you how you can utilize BackupBuddy to make that backup strategy work for you. So again, like I'm really excited about this webinar, and I think we're going to have a good time today. So first, let's talk about why you should back up your site. If you're here, you probably have either experienced your site being hacked and you didn't have a quick way to recover it, or if you ever had an update break your site, how do you can use your backup to roll that back? Hey, we're all human, so I know I have accidentally deleted some tables in my database in the past, and had I not had BackupBuddy there, I would have had some explaining to do to our system administrator here, who probably would have been less than thrilled. And then there's also just data corruption. This can happen whenever your site is trying to communicate with the database, and during that data transfer, there is a timeout on your site causing the data to become corrupt, which it does happen. And using BackupBuddy, you're always just a couple steps away from rolling that back. And then the real cost of lost data is if you're running an e-commerce site, your record of sales. that's something difficult to recover from, and obviously something you that has the utmost priority that you want to keep track of. If you're running an LMS site, your student progress. I know when I take any online courses, I'm kind of one of those achievement hunter people, and so I like to be able to keep track of my progress. If that were to be lost somehow, I would be less than thrilled. And then obviously your customer trust. If you lose any of their account information or proof that they purchased a service from you, then they're going to be less than thrilled about it, and it'll reduce the likelihood of them ever purchasing something from you again. And then also time. I know that the busier that I become, the more that I really do appreciate my time, and I don't want to have to go back and redo any work that's already been completed. So let's talk about the 7 steps of creating a peace of mind when it comes to any kind of data loss. The first thing you're going to think about is choosing your backup method. Today, it's super easy because our backup method is going to be BackupBuddy. And then you have to decide what you need to back up, choose your frequency of backing up, and then you're also going to want to schedule and automate your backups. That way, that's just one less thing you have to take care of. And then you're also, a good idea is to choose an offsite location to store your backups in case something critically, something that's really hard to come back from happens to your server. You can easily migrate that site, migrate your site to a different server using that backup. You also want to scan your backups for malware to ensure you're not, the last thing you want to do is to try to recover from a hack is to use a backup that's been compromised, because you're just going to increase your downtime, and then it just makes for a frustrating situation. And then also, this is one of the most important steps that unfortunately seems like people don't practice very often, is you need to practice restore, because anytime that you're using a backup, that means something has gone wrong. Your palms are going to be sweaty. You're going to be full of anxiety, which is going to new to your critical thinking. And so being able to do a restore from habit is going to really save you so much trouble if you're ever in the situation where you're having to use a backup. So the first thing we need to talk about is what should you include in your backup. If you think about your site is going to include different plugins, themes, your different media, the WordPress core files, things in your upload directory, and then we can't forget about the database. So the anatomy of a WordPress site. So let's take a look at, this is what it looks like inside the WordPress install directory. You're going to find your WP admins and WP includes. These are the directories that store the background files that make WordPress go. I like to think about the WP admin and the WP includes as kind of like the body of your site, where the WP content directory is going to store the plugins, themes, upload directory. So this is kind of what gives your WordPress site its personality and its character. It's what makes your WordPress site you. And then you have the HT access file that's going to contain various different server rules. And you have the WP config.php, which is going to store important information like the database credentials, so your site can communicate with your database. And then inside the WP content directory, again, this is where you make your site personal. You personalize your site, and it really starts to take on your character or your client's character. Is you're going to put in the plugins that make your site go, the themes to make it anything that you have installed in your site. And this is also where your media, your different images that you add to your post will also land. And then I like to think about the database as the brain of the site. This is where everything is going to be stored. So it's kind of like your site's memory. So any transaction, any a lot of times, like the plugin settings are going to be stored there. All the plugin files will be stored on the server and the WP content plugins directory. But when you make adjustments to the settings, your database will remember that and then say, "Hey, BackupBuddy, remember we you set this configuration in the global file." That's where a lot of this stuff will be stored. So now that we talked about what is included in what makes a WordPress site from a file and database standpoint, let's talk about things that you should possibly exclude. So what are some criteria of things you can exclude from your backups? So directory size. So unexpectedly large files can be an indicator that that directory contains a little bit of bloat. So you might want to evaluate whether or not that needs to be included. System files like your server environment files, such as like your php.ini or your nginx.com for your debug log, a lot of times those are going to not be relevant for, you don't necessarily need to keep that in your backup. Subdirectory site. So let's say that you have a parent site, and then within that directory, you have a separate WordPress install. You might want to plan on excluding those subdirectory sites to lighten the backup. Caching files. One of the reasons why you're going to avoid backing up caching files is when you restore using outdated cache or migrate the site with different, use it as like a migrate site to do, and then you update the URLs, the caching files can cause conflicts there. So just avoid including any caching files in your backup to save you from problems later. And another great benefit of creating lighter backups is that lighter backups are going to take less resources to create, because the less you back up, the less resources are going to be required. And also the lighter the backup, the faster you're going to be able to restore your site when disaster strikes. Reducing downtime from whenever disaster strikes is always key. So as we're talking about what to exclude, a great tool that the BackupBuddy has is the size map. You can use the size map to display a comprehensive listing of directories and their size. So let's just take a quick look at this real quick just so you can see what it looks like. So you're going to want to go to your Diagnostics page and then take a look at your size maps. Now you have two options to look at your size map. You can, the quicker, faster to load option is just going to be a size listing list, and you can see that if you, when looking at this log, you can see what is excluded in your backups. So right now you can see the WP content uploads BackupBuddy backups directory is being excluded because you don't need to back up your backups. That is a little bit redundant. And then let's go ahead and scroll all the way down. Another cool thing you can do if you're more of a visual person, you can pull up this this GUI interface, and then you can see what's taking up the most size, and then you can really drill in, see what's included in each directory, and that way you can then make some adjustments on what you will include or exclude. Just because again, our first criteria is like, hey, if a file seems like it's too big, it might contain some bloat, and it would be a good opportunity to exclude that to lighten up the load of your backup. All right, and then another great thing you can do is you can set the database files defaults in the general settings. So now that you know what to exclude, you can now go to your BackupBuddy settings, your general settings, and then come down here and go ahead and make it a global default. So anytime you're creating a new backup profile, which we will be talking about later, or scheduling a new backup, you can use your global defaults so you don't have to go in and then re-exclude every time you're customizing your backups. Okay, and then let's talk about choosing your backup frequency. So the common rule is of choosing your backup frequency is you should be backing up as often as you should be backing up enough to keep up with your site changes. And then you also have to think about how much tolerance do you have for lost data. So if you just think about how like if you're updating your site, if you have a daily blog, you're going to be wanting to update at least once a day. That way you're not having to ever redo the post or risk losing data that way. And then, so let's go ahead and talk about creating a custom backup profile. So if you go to your new backups page and then you go to create a backup, you'll see right here you have a list of backup files. So when you're customizing your backup, let's say that with the frequency of your backup, you have decided that you have an e-commerce site. So you need to be making sure that you are updating your database every single hour to really mitigate the loss of any potential sales, or if you're an LMS site, any sales or student data. So let's say you create a new profile, and then you can choose like a default. Let's do new, or let's do hourly database. So we can do the database only, and then you can click the settings wheel on it. And then if you can also go in and then fine tune whatever you need. And once you set your global defaults, you can just use that, or you can change which tables you want to back up are the ones that they pick up. And then once you have that set up, let's talk about scheduling and automating your backups. So now that you know how often you need to create your backups, you need to choose when you'll create your backup, and then you also want to automate your backup. So, so by default, anytime you are making a new backup in BackupBuddy, it's going to be stored locally on your server, like we saw earlier in the file or in the file listing. Our backups are being stored in the WP content uploads BackupBuddy directory. But you also want to store your backups on an offsite location, because if you ever have a server hack or a server crash, or God forbid that you're running on one of these do-it-themselves hosts that have a single server and no real backup plan for it, and they have hard drive failure, there's no coming back from that. Or same scenario, but this time, unfortunately, let's say it's in Oklahoma and then a tornado hits it, then there's no coming back. And then also redundancy. It's good to have multiple backups, because it's just insurance if one of those safe houses fail. So the more places that you can store that you can afford to, you don't have to go overboard. But I like to store my backups for personal sites. I do it in Stash, and then I also have a Google Drive account that I store my backups in. So let's go back over here real quick and talk about a couple different things. One, you can set up your remote destinations from the destinations page. So real quick, we'll just go to and then let me go to LastPass, get my password, copy this in here. And what I'm doing right now is I'm adding Stash, which is the Ithemes Stash is the Ithemes storage. So what is great about using Stash with BackupBuddy is that since we are able to kind of handle that whole environment ecosystem for you, we can handle everything from creating the backup to the storage of it. It just makes it a little bit easier to set up and configure and use. And then, sorry, I was doing some changing to my passwords recently. And somehow in my LastPass, it's user error definitely, but somehow I have we got multiple different iThemes accounts. Oh, come on now. And so I'm having to find the right password to set this up. Here we go. This should be it. Okay, it's not. This is also a webinar site that we just created for servers, so there might be an issue with that too. But I will troubleshoot that later. So anyway, all you have to do to add Stash as a remote destination is entering your iThemes credentials. Typically, if there wasn't user error involved, which I'm going to definitely think this is probably user error in my case with my LastPass account issues. But once you have it set up, you can start automatically sending any backups created there. That way it's stored on an offsite location, adding a little bit of redundancy and spreading out the risk. And then once you have that set up, what you can do is you can start scheduling your backups. So let's go ahead and create a schedule. And what is great about BackupBuddy is, again, you can make the frequency exactly how you would like it. So if you're a blog and then you're constantly, if you upload images and new things daily, you can do a full backup, a complete backup once daily, and then create that and then add the remote destination to it and then automatically have it send that way. But let's say that you also have an e-commerce site, so you want to make sure that you're backing up your database hourly. You can then come back in here, create a new schedule, and then choose the hourly database profile that you created. That way, you are completely customizing what you want to back up and when you want to back up. And another great thing about using leveraging the power of the backup profiles and the backup scheduling. Let's say you are on a host with limited resources. I know those of you who are managing clients, you have some of them that we will just say are cheap, and they won't spend a lot of money on hosting, which then also limits the amount of resources you have. So a lot of times, in order to there's a couple different things you can do. You can back up during the downtimes, but then you can also break up those backups by creating multiple profiles and then scheduling to run at different times, because you can schedule how often you're going to have them run, and you can schedule the time for them to run. And so for an example, you can you can update your plugins separately, then you can update your themes, then you can update your database, and then you can do like a once daily backup when it's the slowest. That way you're making sure that you're keeping up with all the changes on your site, but also reducing the amount of resources that it takes to create a backup. Most websites, you can just run a complete backup. You're never going to have an issue with it. But I know some of you are who have clients that like all the bells and whistles, but don't like quality hosting. So we talked about adding a remote destination and creating a backup. Automating your backup, it just takes one thing off your list, and it's important. And if you're anything like me, sometimes we are spinning so many plates that we forget to do some of the important things. So everything that you can automate, especially important things like creating a backup, I would highly suggest that you do. And then creating a backup that works for your schedule. And again, if you're using poor hosting, you can kind of space that stuff out. So another thing I would want to talk about is backing up before updating. So as we can see, I have a plugin update. So before I update, let's just go ahead and we can just go ahead and just do a complete backup. And then, so that way, if something does happen after we do update, we can roll back that. We have a point of restore before any kind of trouble happened on the site. So let's go ahead and update. All right, content upgrades, another great Ithemes plugin. So let's go ahead and say we updated that. And then just for the webinar example, let's say something bad happened, something terrible happened, and that caused a conflict on our site. We need to roll back from that. So you have a couple of different options. And this is why practicing restoring really comes in handy, because like disaster struck, my update caused some kind of problem on my site. The faster that I can restore it, the least amount of downtime that I'll have, and the likelihood of someone noticing something wrong on the site, the chances that goes way, way, way down the faster you get it back up and going. So you have a couple different options. One, you can go to your back to your backups, and then go to restore. And then you can restore the whole site by clicking that button. Or right now, we don't need to restore the whole site. We know what the problem is. The update caused an issue on our site. So why don't we just roll back the update? So again, as we talked about earlier, the plugin is going to be located in the WP Content Plugins directory. And what is great about this new restore backup location is that we can see that the version of content upgrades in the backup is 2.04 or 2.0.4, and the one installed on the site is 2.0.6. So we know that we are going to be able to roll back a version by just restoring this one folder. It's going to say, hey, this can't be done. You sure you want to do it? Yes, I do. And so this is going to go ahead and just roll back that broken update. I can do that directly from the WordPress dashboard. And that's why I'd always recommend before doing any kind of updates or making any major changes to your site, just go ahead and do a quick backup. That way, without even leaving your WordPress dashboard, you can either restore the whole site, or you can just restore the file that was changed that caused the problem in the first place. And this normally doesn't take too long. And as it progresses, you can see exactly where it is. Okay, so it's done. So we can go and just visit the site, make sure everything looks good. Yep, that's exactly how I left it. And then let's go ahead and hit reload. Let's go to plugins. And then we can see that content upgrades did roll back to version 2.0.4. So again, make sure you're backing up before you make changes on your site. And if you are using your backup profiles or creating a whole backup, you can just roll back exactly what you need to restore your state to a site that was in working order. And then 7A was just roll back an update from the dashboard restore. So that's what I really like this. I can't overemphasize. If you haven't played around or practiced messing around with the dashboard restore feature, I know, I think it's fun. I think it's cool. I really, really like this feature because as we talked about earlier, if you're using a backup, that means something's gone wrong. And so the fact that we were able to simplify the backup process in those stressful times to just being a couple clicks is something I'm really, really excited about. One thing that we really are focusing on is like design through empathy. Like, what can we do to make your lives easier? And this is an example of the BackupBuddy team, along with the design team, really trying to create a feature to make a difficult situation just a little bit easier. If we can just make it a little bit easier for you, that is what we want to do.
Yeah, and Michael, one more thing before you go away from that page real quick. A lot of folks I know have trouble with, you got this giant 800 megabyte or gigabyte size backup in some remote destination. One of the nice things you can do if the remote destination is set up within BackupBuddy is, if we had that to show, I know we're not connected to one, but there's when you can browse the backups that are listed on the remote destination, there's a copy to local link. So you can copy it directly from your remote destination right into BackupBuddy and then click restore right there without ever having to FTP it or move it around and to your computer, then up to the website, all that hassle. You can do that immediately. And Michael, I dropped my credentials for Stash into the chat to you if you want to use those to set that up real quick, and that might be something to show.
Sorry, where'd you drop that at?
In the GoToWebinar chat.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at Slack. That, and then, okay. I'm just going to take this. Whoop.
Yeah, especially for those of you who are on, yeah, thanks. Paul said I could share the credentials in the chat, so I think I'll avoid doing that. And if we can avoid broadcasting those, that'd be awesome. But yeah, so especially for those of you who have, not super fast connections, downloading, an 800 megabyte BackupBuddy file of a large site, that's hard enough. But then trying to upload that, I mean, it can take, 15 to 20 minutes sometimes, depending on your connection speed. So being able to move those from server to server is lightning fast, and you can see those hundreds of megabytes backup files end up right on your site to restore just within less than a minute. I'm actually not sure what's there in that remote destination, but nothing critical.
I'm going to bring it over here just in case. I just want to make sure I'm not showing any sensitive information, and we'll bring it right back over.
There's probably a few live site backups over there, but nothing is critical. That'll let people see it at least. Stacy, you're right. And if your ISP captured data, moving around those big files can really chew up your bandwidth. So being able to go server to server has a lot of benefits. Gosh, especially like if you're on the road, because, the things happen at the worst possible time. So maybe you're traveling, and that's when that big e-commerce site that you support decides to go down. Then, trying to, on hotel Wi-Fi, download a gigantic backup file and then re-up, that's such a pain. But
yeah. Since, here, what we can do, let's go ahead and create another backup and send it to Stash real quick.
There we go.
Or I guess I could have just sent an existing backup to Stash, but that's okay. No, that is especially doing it via FTP. FTP just makes everything slower. And so, no, you're absolutely right. Being able to download that directly from a remote destination to to locally will make it work. And if you're using a stash backup, you can click restore and it'll download it all in that process for you. So let's go ahead and then backup complete. Let's send to an offsite location. Let's send to stash version 3. File schedule will be sent, and then we'll come back and look at this a little bit later after it transfer, and we'll take a look at how that works with the restore. And
Yes.
Nathan, please remind me to go back to that before.
Yeah, sorry to drop in your flow there. I thought that'd be fun for people to see.
No, yeah, that's definitely something we should cover. So thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to do that, so I didn't have to troubleshoot my LastPass issues live. Okay, let's go back to, all right, so what we're talking about, leveraging the power of the Diagnostics page. So from this page, you're going to be able to view the server configuration, directory permissions, recent backup, recent restores, your activity history, and different cron events. So like a great thing just on the server Diagnostics page, you can kind of see if there's any errors of what some weaknesses that might be in your server. So like if you don't have the recommended PHP memory, this is stuff that when you're working with the BackupBuddy support team, you can kind of share with them to give them the information that they need to kind of help you troubleshoot your site. Plus, this will also give you something to bring. These aren't really crazy requirements. If your host isn't meeting some of these requirements, you might want to reach out to them and say, hey, come on, guys, it's 2020. Let's get with the times. So you can also look at the directory permissions. And the reason why the directory permissions are important to you, they have to be flexible enough for WordPress to work with your site. So if you are ever running into any kind of permission issue when like creating a backup, which it'll be pretty clear, like BackupBuddy's not allowed to, doesn't have the necessary permissions to read this file or whatever it needs to do. You can look at what the suggested value is and then the actual value of these directories right here. So when you are needed to change that, you can either go do it yourself via FTP or command line, or you can reach out to your host and say, hey, my WP includes is currently 755 or 775, but I would like to have it be 755. How can I go do that? And then this also shows like your URL and paths of your different important directories. Like for example, hey, where are my backups located? You can go right here. You can see the exact directory path you need to take to get to your backups on your server. What's the site and home URLs, and just different URL settings from there. Another thing is you can look at all your database tables. Like it's not just the ones for your site, but if like we talked about earlier, if you have any subsites, any subdirectory sites, you'll be able to see those tables here as well. And then you can also, I feel like excluded them, the subdirectory tables, you should also have them excluded here in the global default. So you can make sure that's done. We talked about the size map. Again, a good tool, especially when like if you are in a port, if you're, I've talked to enough people who sometimes they've had those clients who are just not willing to spend any more on hosting. And so it makes everything you do a little bit more difficult. So the size map, what this can help you do is save time managing this client's site by telling you exactly, help give you the information you need to find out where the bloat is, or maybe where you need to create a custom backup profile to complete the backup process more in chunks. That way you can accommodate your, I just don't know how to say it, your cheap client. I don't know how to say it any nicer, sorry. Another good thing is like, okay, like when you're scheduling your backup, so anytime like WP cron is used to run any scheduled event. So if you're automating your backups and you're creating backup schedules, it's going to need cron to run it. And so if there's any cron issues, you can see, and again, most of the time you're not going to have to look at this, but I just think it's great that it has the tools in here so you can see to help you troubleshoot if anything does go awry. And as you can also see a warning. For some reason, their next run is passed. It should have run 7 seconds ago. I'm not too concerned about it being 7 seconds late right now, because one of the things that impacts WP cron is traffic to your site. Without consistent traffic, it's not going to trigger cron events, which is different things that you can do to accommodate for that on sites with low traffic, such as signing up for some kind of uptime service. If you're a Sync Pro member, we have an uptime monitoring feature that's going to ping your site enough to make sure that your cron is running consistently. Recent actions, this is great because you can see, hey, like how have my backups been running? You can go, like we just did a restore, and so we can look and see all the different details about what happened in the restore. If for some reason it did fail, we can see on what part of the restore process it did fail. And then you can also see the time that it took to restore, which was 35 seconds, which is pretty good. Okay, and see right now, we can see that we had that BackupBuddy backup that we were sending over to Stash. It's currently in progress. So we're still should be good because it just checked it unfinished. Sometimes it does take a while to transfer those backups. And then activity history, you can just go and look and see like the different processes that have run. Malware scan will give you history of malware scans, which is one's not going to have a lot because it is a really new site. And then you can also have your different logs. Like you can have just make sure you don't miss anything. This is most of the time you're not going to have to look at any of this stuff, but this is good to know that it's here. That way, if you are ever working for support and they ask you to go find some stuff, you can know where to find it. So most of the time, hopefully, if everything goes right, you don't have to deal with leveraging the power of the diagnostics page, but just know that it is there. So if you do need some of that information, it's ready and available for you. All right, and then another cool thing is you can manage these backups from sync. So now that we created that new database profile, we can now see it in sync, and then we can actually trigger it. For those of you who don't know sync is a remote management tool. So you can add all your sites here, and you can run different maintenance things from a single dashboard. So if you have multiple sites, you can quickly switch between them. Just to give you a little bit of context of what sync is, but why we're here is to talk about the BackupBuddy integration in sync. So you can download your latest backups from here. You can find them from right here. You can create a new schedule, and then you can see what profiles were created, and then all your stash backups will be here as well. Which it looks like it's still transferring. All right, and then another thing we talked about earlier. You want to make sure that you're scanning your site for malware, and it's also a good plan to make sure you're scanning your backups for malware. So back in that malware log, but again, new site, new, not going to have a lot of information there, but you can look at your different malware scan history and see if that if the site was scanned and came up clean right around the time that backup was created, or you can just use BackupBuddy Stash Live. And what that does, it really simplifies the backup strategy process. What you do is just enter in your credentials right here. And with Stash Live, once it's connected, it's going to actively track real-time changes. It's going to create snapshots of your site. So when a change happens, it's going to see it, and it's going to back up your site. It's going to automatically move those backups to Stash in the offsite location. Stash backups are compatible with the dashboard restore feature. And there's also file level malware and virus scanning. So every time a backup gets sent to Stash using Stash Live, it's going to be scanned for malware to make sure that it's clean. And then some other resources that you can look at. The Ithemes blog will make you aware of feature releases. The YouTube channel have different tutorials over all the Ithemes product. The BackupBuddy Help Center is a great tool for you to do if you're ever trying to troubleshoot anything. Also, the support team has really been working on updating and adding useful articles to the BackupBuddy Help Center, and it's really over the past 6 months, it's really gotten a lot better. And we just recently published a book, Getting Started with BackupBuddy, that kind of goes over all the different BackupBuddy settings. Plus, it goes into greater detail about each of the settings on the server diagnostics page. Oh, whoops, I clicked destination, not diagnostics page. Yeah. So it goes and tells you exactly what each of these means and what you can look at or what you're looking at when you're seeing it. So it doesn't just look like a bunch of words to you. It gives a little bit of meanings to it. And it's going to go to the backups and then restore backup. And then all right, let's go to destinations. So I'm trying to see if this made it there yet to oh yeah, that makes sense because it's going to yours. That's why I'm not seeing it. Hold on one second. Moving off site again real quick. Actually, no, I don't want to pull up your sync account. But here's the thing with, especially if you're using Stash, now we're trying to, we're still working on it, but we are trying to simplify some of, let me rephrase that. We're trying to make it easier to use BackupBuddy. So your Stash backups and other are going to show up right here. And there's not going to differentiate between those and local backups because we figured to you, it doesn't really matter. You just need to know that a backup was created and that you can restore it. And when you're using Stash as a remote destination and storing your backups there, it's going to treat it just like as if it were a local backup. So you can do restore yes. And it's going to treat it like a local backup. And you'll still be able to go in and it's going to download. What did I meant to look at the files? All right, well, I already started that. I meant to go actually look at the files, and it'll look exactly like when we restored when we rolled back that update. It will look exactly the same. It'll show you what version is in the backup of a plugin, what version's installed on your site, and you'll be able to restore it just like we did with the local backup earlier. A couple more things before we start taking questions. One thing I'm super excited about is today we launched multiple plans for Ithemes hosting. Before we were just limited to 2 sites. We wanted to really make sure the hosting was new to us. We wanted to make sure that we had a good handle on it before we got too crazy with it. And now we're ready to unleash the power of Ithemes hosting. And you can get anything from a 2-site plan to a 100-site plan. And what's great about Ithemes hosting, every single plan is going to include BackupBuddy, Ithemes Sync Pro, Ithemes Security, SSL certificates for all your sites. SSL certificates will automatically be installed and automatically update, so you don't ever have to worry about that. And again, your backup solution is going to be BackupBuddy, and you'll have access to everything we talked about today, plus Sync Pro, plus Ithemes. That should say that's my fault. That's Ithemes Security Pro that is included with it. And then also, as Nathan mentioned earlier, we have a 40% off site-wide sale. Happy birthday to Ithemes. We want you to buy our stuff, so we're discounting it greatly by a lot. So go check that out. And yeah, I would encourage you. Really, like, we're doing some real cool stuff with our list building plugins. If you haven't checked out the content upgrades yet or the landing pages, they're really, really cool. We'll talk about those probably some later this year in a different webinar. But let's go ahead and take any questions that you have, and I would love to clarify anything that I didn't make clear.
Yeah, awesome. So if you have questions you haven't asked yet, ithemes.com/chat, ithemes.com/chat. Let me note one more time, drop the slide link in, as well as the replay link for today's webinar. In case you want those, we'll have the replay up in about an hour, but we got lots of good questions, so don't leave because there's a lot of good questions that have been asked, and we're going to get those over to Michael. So there is a question in the chat from Michael. Is there a demo account to try Ithemes hosting?
No, there's not, but right now you can try it for super, super cheap, low investment, because it's 40% off of $15, and then you can cancel at the end of the month, but there is not a trial for Ithemes hosting as of right now. But I will add that to my list as something to discuss.
Yeah, good question, Michael. Thanks. And before we get into our list here, Jean just asked, she missed how to run the malware scan on the backup. Could you show that, please?
Yeah. after it's done restoring. Yeah, we'll come back. Sorry, I
Okay, yeah,
accidentally
Gene.
restored the whole site.
Yeah, we'll come right back to that, Gene. Okay, so starting with my list here, and again, if you have a question, ithemes.com/chat. Paul asked a question as we were just getting started today. He said he was moving a site this past weekend. It had a little bit of a tough time. The restore was going okay until it stalled out on the WP options table, which can, Paul, it can get huge depending on the site. So is there a way, Michael, to start things up halfway again, like starting it out there?
Not that I'm aware of, but Paul creating a ticket with the BackupBuddy team. I don't know, Josh, one of the head BackupBuddy support, plus he's helped do some of the dev work on it as well, so he might be in chat today. But so Josh, if you're there, if you could answer Paul's question for us. But if not, you can create a ticket at the Ithemes Help Center, and they'll be able to help you out. Sorry, Paul, I hate when I'm not able to help out cool people immediately, because to be honest, I'm very familiar with the settings and getting BackupBuddy to work for me, but I'm not as familiar with the troubleshooting and the support end of it.
Yeah, Paul. So I'll just add to that the issue a lot of times with restoring a large database is, if it's huge and you've got hundreds of thousands of rows, as you can have sometimes on different tables, it's going to time out. So you can sometimes set the timeouts differently in the advanced settings of Import Buddy. You can also, like you said, if it stalls out, then what you can do is you'd have to kind of do some manual stuff. It's not a lot of fun, but you can drop the table that was only halfway completed and then go into the advanced settings of Import Buddy and specify just which tables you want to restore, and kind of starting with the one where it dropped off. So you can do it. It is not for the faint of heart, but support can help you work your way through that. Yeah, Paul, you're saying it was less than 300 megabytes, but 300 megabytes of text is a lot of text, a lot of rows in a database. So what you really want to look at, if you pull it up in PHPMyAdmin, you can see how many rows are actually on that table, and I bet you find that options table is 100,000 rows plus, and it just takes a long time. So that's the source. And I would recommend that you, just reach out to support, and they can talk you through that process. I've done it before. Again, not a lot of fun, but it is possible. Okay, Sherry has a question. I set up BackupBuddy so it's supposed to delete old backups on Sync and Stash, and they don't get deleted as new backups are made. What do I need to do to get it to work correctly?
No, it should be. If you have it in the settings to be... you have your local archive limit set, and it's not deleting as those new backups are being added. Could be a couple different issues. Again, I would definitely suggest starting with a support ticket, but on the destination page, you can go to the cron events and I keep hitting the wrong, but the diagnostics page, and go to your cron and look for the cron event 2. The housekeeping, and try manually running this cron job, and then see if that will go ahead and work for you. And then open up a support ticket and see if they can figure out why it's not automatically running. There could be a couple different reasons. There's a whole bunch of different things that could happen with cron, and there is an alternative cron system in BackupBuddy that's supposed to help with that, but anytime you're dealing with cron, it is a more loaded question than it would seem, because there's a lot of different things that could happen there. But I would start with making sure you don't have any errors on your cron page, because again, that's just another scheduled event. And if that scheduled event's not running, typically it's going to be something to do with cron.
Yeah, and Sherry, just one thing to note in this, I've seen this be confusing to some people. There are 2 places that you need to make settings changes to delete old backups. There's local backups, which is handled right there in the BackupBuddy settings, general settings page right there, local archive storage limits. There's also for the remote destination. You need to go into the remote destination and set the number of backups there as well. Those are independent things, because we're talking about 2 different places where backups can be stored, locally on the website and then in the remote destination. So you want to make sure that the settings in both of those areas are what you needed to do. And Sherry's saying that's what it was. Awesome.
Oh,
So
great.
save you a trouble ticket there, Sherry.
Nathan, thanks for making me look good.
Oh man, well I've been using BackupBuddy since like it was the first version. Um,
Yeah, no, I know you have. You are an expert. Real
I don't know
quick,
about that. Go ahead.
so going back to the diagnostics page, click on the malware scan tab and scroll to the bottom and then perform malware scan. And then that will connect to security.net and then check your site for malware. And if you have iThemes Security Pro, that you can enable automatic malware scanning, and then your site will be scanned automatically twice daily.
There
Sorry,
you go.
Next question, please.
Very good. Okay, so Paul wanted to know what are the newer .dat files that are created in the backups directory? They're in the uploads BackupBuddy _backups directory.
What that is, the .dat file, that's new with the dashboard restore feature. And with the .dat file, it is a text file that includes like everything that's in the backup. So when you're going and looking at the restore files, it's going to show what files are included in that backup. So like we were looking at earlier when we were looking at the plugins, it's going to show the version of the plugin in the backup and the version of the plugin installed. And that happens, this gets shown from that .dat file. Does that make sense? Did I explain that okay?
Yep. So Paul is asking, do we need them? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Don't delete the .dat files.
If you're wanting to use the dashboard restore feature, which I would, because it's I don't know, it's nice when you can. Obviously, if you're migrating a site, like you mentioned earlier, you're not going to be able to use the dashboard restore feature, but it is important for, especially when you're trying to do just a single file or a single plugin restore. You can then easily compare versions of them. That way, you know you're backing up the right thing or restoring the right thing.
Yeah, for sure. And if something messes up and maybe it's a plugin or maybe it's you just need to refresh the database, you can do that really fast with Dashboard Restore without having to go and upload the thing and run the import buddy and all that. So it's really a lot simpler of a process that way.
Yeah.
All right, John this is a great idea. And John, I've actually already pushed this upstream as a feature request, but John is asking, does BackupBuddy help create lighter backups automatically? And I know the answer to that is no, but maybe talk about that for a minute, Michael. There's a lot of settings that you can do to exclude directories and so forth, but I think it'd be cool to have like an intelligent backup buddy saying, hey, there's a version of WordPress here that you're backing up that you may not want to.
Yeah, there's so BackupBuddy won't ever do any of that automatically for you, except when it comes to like certain backup files. So like it will automatically exclude the old backups because you don't need to back up a backup, and then also excludes the BackupBuddy logs because like that probably isn't going to be relevant information to you that you need to have in that backup. But using the directory size list, and this is one thing that you can go and start looking at when you are looking to what to exclude. Because again, if something seems like it's too big, because you can look like how many files are in this folder, what's the actual size of it, and then start getting a better idea. And another article that I would recommend in the iThemes Help Center that Josh wrote, let me find the URL for it so I can post it in chat, gives you some things that you can look for when you are wanting to figure out what you need to exclude. I got the link, and I'm going to throw it into the chat right now. I don't think I captured the full URL. Is that? Oh my gosh. Here, I'm gonna Nathan, I'm gonna send it to you because again, I need to put in my iTunes password.
Sure.
And I sent it to you. So can you post that in the chat? But this is what it looks like. I'll pull up here on this screen. So this is a good article that you can take a look at when you're trying to create lighter backups. Look at the different system files. One of the things that it talks about in here is that I didn't add to the slides was files that are necessary for the site to fully function. And then something here about files and creating other plugins. Like, okay, like WordFence creates a PHP configuration file called .user.any, and it uses an absolute file path that will break if you're moving to a new server, because that file path is going to change. So different things like that can help to exclude it. And then also, like, just depending on what you're working with, like as we talked about, and the WP includes an admin directory, those aren't going to contain anything useful to your site. And that's something you can easily always go and get from any WordPress, like new WordPress download, and you can just drag and drop those into here and get it working, because those aren't anything specific to your site, the WP admin, WP include. So if you were in a pinch, to say that you are in a situation where you just absolutely need to move hosts, and you're just trying to make it as the backup as slim as possible as you can to migrate it to a different site. These are one of the things that would be easy to replace if you're just trying to, in a pinch, get something off of a host to migrate it to a new site. Because there are times where, like, for whatever reason, a server makes changes that just do not play well with your site, or they change the way their plans work, whatever it is. If you need to move in a pinch, there's you can use that article and think about what things aren't necessarily specific to your site that you can avoid to back up, to kind of try to move the site in a pinch.
Absolutely. All right, so let me move on. Kind of in the same vein, both Cheesehead and Mel had a question about how do we avoid backing up cache files. Where do those things usually live, Michael? How do we find them, and how do we not back them up? Or should we just not worry about it?
No, you should not back them up. And what you can do, generally speaking, so they're depending on the plugin that you're using. If we're looking at the, let's just go to, let's look at, let's go down the bottom and let's look at this. So a lot of times those are going to be in the WP content. I've seen along with like the plugin directory and the themes directory and the uploads directory. A lot of times I've seen it in here. There's like a file called cache, or if you go into the plugin itself, like if you're using like Rocket Cache or what have you, they'll store some of those cache files directly in the plugins directory. And then another thing to think about, there sometimes also have rules written to the htaccess that you don't necessarily have to, if you are running cache and it does write stuff to the htaccess, you can exclude the htaccess from the backup, because WordPress will automatically generate a new one anytime you save the WordPress permalink settings. Anytime you go in here and you just go and click save changes, and then it'll automatically generate a new one. But Nathan, did I miss any locations?
No, so the cache files are usually in the uploads folder under WP content. Yeah. That's just a folder where they put things. But you want to check with your plugin that you're using for caching in their documentation. That should be an easy information to find. And you can just exclude those in the settings like we've talked about. Now, Mel had a question right there in the chat that I want to comment on just for a second. And Mel is asking, if you already have cache files in your backups, is it like the end of the world? Are things going to blow up? What should you do? So don't go in there and try to remove them before you restore. That's counterproductive. When you restore the backup that might have cache files, just the first thing you do is go in there and clear the cache after the restore completes, and you'll be fine. I normally do that anyway, and then I reset permalinks as well, just to be sure everything's working. And I know some of you folks have had that. I've talked to some of you about, hey, we did a restore with BackupBuddy, and for whatever reason, like you could visit the homepage, but none of the other pages were working. Just go in there and reset permalinks, and you're good to go. It's something weird with the htaccess file that causes that when it restores. So that usually solves all of those problems. Anything else I missed on that, Michael?
No, I don't think so. And yeah, just like Nathan was saying, it's not the end of the world. You might not run into any issues. And if you are restoring to the same location, a lot of times you're not going to have any problems. All you're going to do is click the clear cache button. Really, when you're migrating the site is when it can cause an issue. And if it does, you hit up support and they'll help walk you through, if necessary, how you can delete it for the backup. But again, like Nathan said, hopefully just clearing the cache and resaving the permalink settings will be all you have to do.
Exactly. I've never seen that not work. So If that helps to give everybody a sigh of relief, there you go. Okay, moving on down the list to several different things about remote destinations. Michael wanted to know if it's possible to implement Apple iCloud backup as a remote destination.
It is not currently. I'll go to the destination page and show you what we have. We just added our first new remote destination. It's been a while since we added one, but we just added support for OneDrive. But the ones that you can do is our Stash, Amazon S3, Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, and yeah, those are the main ones. But I can definitely add that to as a feature request if it's not already there.
And if Apple plays well with others in that regard as well.
Yeah, because that's the thing, we are limited to the APIs that are available for us to tap into.
Yep. Okay, moving on along, Guy, same question about pCloud, probably the same answer as well.
Yep.
Let's see, and John wanted to know, could you clarify what is the advantage of using Stash versus something like Google Drive or OneDrive as a remote destination?
So twofold. One, if you're using Stash Live, one, you just enter in your username and password, then all of a sudden, like, your site's going to be backed up with all the changes, and everything's going to be handled for you. But Stash Live doesn't necessarily work for everyone and everyone's needs in every single case. But also, just the setting up and configuring, it's easier because we control everything. Where we have made OneDrive a little bit easier because we had to create our own OAuth server in order to make the destination work. So that one's not too bad. But if you go look at the documentation for remote destinations, in order to create, there's like, I don't know, around probably 30 steps for adding Google Drive as a remote destination, because in order to take advantage of their API, there's a bunch of different steps that you're required to do from your Google admin account, because you're creating a new app inside your WordPress admin menu, and then you have to configure it to be able to connect to your WordPress site. I'm making it sound more complicated than it is. It's just time consuming, honestly, where using Stash, all you have to do is enter in your Ithemes username and password, and then it's done. Then it's connected, and you can start sending backups that way. And then also, as of right now, the Stash backups work with that WordPress dashboard restore feature. There are ways to make the Google Drive backups work, but it's not perfect when it comes to restoring from other remote destinations. So Stash, just because it's within our control, we can control everything in it. It just is going to work with BackupBuddy.
For sure. And just to note, there is a difference between Stash and Stash Live. Stash is a remote destination that you can configure your backups to send to, whereas Stash Live keeps a live snapshot of your site. As soon as a change is made, that data is slowly sipped over to the Stash Live servers. So all those things are pretty cool. Let's see. Still concerning Stash, Michael would like to know, noticing there the new Stash version 3 and the Stash version 2 down below. Should we go, if we have Stash 2 sites set up, should we go in there and update them all to Stash version 3?
And you don't have to. I'm assuming at some point this will change. We might eventually deprecate this, but it's not going to be anytime soon. So there's no sense of urgency. When creating new sites, I would recommend using version 3, but there's no sense of urgency to go and change version 2. There are some benefits when it comes to performance with working with version 3, but I don't think it's so urgent, and I don't think there's any reason for you to have to go and do that right now. But anytime you create a new site, I would definitely do V3 over V2.
Good. All right, so Paul would like to know, is BackupBuddy still considered beta for multi-site? Any news or what's going on with multi-site support?
No, I don't have anything new, and honestly, like, multi-site is probably, I don't know if we'll ever be confident enough, just because of the intricacies that go into creating a multi-site and the layer of complexity that is added to it, that we'll ever feel confident enough to making saying it's not beta anymore, and just, and there's some other cool things that you can do now to avoid some of the complexity that comes with multi-site, as far as like using multiple domains in a single WordPress install without it being multi-site. And I see things moving more in that direction and moving more away from multi-site. This is one man's opinion, by the way, Paul. This is complete conjecture on my part, just so we're clear. But to be honest, to answer your question, I don't believe that will ever be pulled out of beta just because of the complexity layer.
Yeah, exactly. And, I know folks who are using multi-site, who are using BackupBuddy with it, but it's not the use case for multi-site doesn't generally line up with the customer base that iThemes has. So that it would be interesting if you have some specific, if you need, just let us know specifically about what you're looking for, and we'll definitely talk to folks about that. Okay, so John would like to know, does the ability to restore a single item, such as the plugin you demonstrated, rely on the backup to be local, or can it be from a remote destination as well?
It can be from Stash, or it can be local. And as of right now, the other remote destinations aren't supported. That doesn't mean that won't happen in the future, but as of right now, the Stash and local backups are the only ones that are compatible with the dashboard restore feature.
Very cool. All right, down to the last question here, and we'll let Michael off the hook. Doe would like to know, when using BackupBuddy to migrate a site, will it overwrite, for example, the existing images on the target domain?
So when you are migrating a site, generally speaking, you're going to be using import buddy. I think long-winded answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be clearing that out and then adding a new WordPress install and kind of starting from scratch, and then using that backup to turn that blank WordPress install into something, if that makes sense.
For sure. So it's like when you uncompress a zip file. If there are files that are named the same thing as things that are being uncompressed, they're going to get overwritten. If there are files that already exist that aren't in the backup, they're going to stay. So it's just like unzipping a zip file anywhere else. So if that helps, generally it's best practice if you're going to restore a backup. I usually go in and wipe everything so it's clean. That's just me. That's my best practice. So, but you can do with a dashboard restore. It's just going to override everything. So that's the way those things are going to work. All right, folks, great questions today from everybody. We've had a good discussion here. Michael, any last words as we're starting to wrap up here?
No, other than just thank you everyone for showing up. I really excited that you guys gave me another opportunity to come show you guys a little bit of what our products can do, and just keep an eye out for 2020, because I think this is going to be a really, really good year for iThemes training and hosting and everything else. And yeah, thanks for being here, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Michael. Once again, we did drop in the replay link and the slide link in the chat. If you want those, we'll have the replay up in about an hour or so after we get it all saved and rendered and all that stuff. So that'll be available if you want to re-look at anything. One more last reminder about the iThemes birthday sale. Good for a few more days, 40% off everything, including that brand new iThemes training membership that we just started offering this month. So if you have enjoyed iThemes training and you want to have all of the premium events for 2020, you can get those at a really low price right now. So I'd encourage you to do that, along with all those new levels of iThemes hosting. And as always, if you have more questions about training or iThemes hosting or any of those things, just email sales@ithemes.com, and the friendly folks over there will get your questions answered.
And before we sign off, sorry, I just want to say one thing. Nathan's doing the second year of the freelance leap year. That is one of our, out of all of our products, we consider training a product. Out of all of our products, one of the highest rated, highly reviewed. We get so many people saying so many nice things about that training, the freelance leap year, and how invaluable it is to them. Because of Nathan, all credit goes to Nathan. Definitely something worth checking out. So I want to thank you for it, because it's seriously, we get so many people just talking about how great it is and how great that Slack room is to have that chat there. So if you are going to take advantage of that training stuff, definitely check out Nathan's freelance leap year, because he literally wrote the book on it, and definitely an expert. And if you can take advantage of using him as a resource, you should do it. Sorry, that
Thanks,
was my
Michael.
plug for you.
Thanks, Michael. If you want more information on freelance leap year, that does start next week with our first month starting on productivity. As we're getting this year started, a lot of folks are struggling to get in gear for 2020. We're going to be talking about some strategies on how to do that. Just go to ithemes.com, click the training link at the top, and you'll see freelance leap year as the first item in the menu underneath it. Have a look at that and join us next week when we do that. Once again, my name is Nathan Ingram. We really appreciate Michael for sharing with us. We appreciate all of you being with us here as well. So from everybody else here at Ithemes, hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll see you next time here on Ithemes Training, where we go further together.